he knows these guys inside and out. And so, when you talk about having these, these updated Silver Age type stories, he's like one of the best people ever to be able to do that.
Yeah, like it's almost quaint for us to like try to have like a real conversation about this book that isn't just like Mark Waid's like doing a really good job here, doing exactly what Mark Waid does, and Dan Mora doing a really good job doing exactly what Dan Mora does.
Mark Waid's just gonna Mark Waid.
Welcome back to the Men of Steel podcast. I'm Casey Aiken, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, J. Folson.
Oh, wait, that's me. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the show. Glad to have you.
I mean, it's good to be here as a team, right? Like you and I, we have been stalwart companions for nigh on 5-6 years now for the run on this podcast.
Oh my gosh, has it been that long?
Something like that. I mean, this is like episode 130 or something like that. So like, with an average of 25 episodes a year. Yeah. We're in our 6th year of doing this together. And it's good to have a team like that because, like we support each other. We're able to back each other up. Some might say we're this world's finest.
Oh my gosh. He said the thing.
It's been a long time coming for us to have like a proper World's Finest episode, considering that is such a important part of the history of Superman and the lore of Superman. And so today we are going to have a conversation about the recent World's Finest first arc, which is issues 1 through 6, which is the Devil Nezha story. We're going to talk a little bit about the book, but to have that conversation about the book, we are joined once again by Jim Fetters.
Hey, Case. Hey, Jmike. Good to be back.
So good to have you back. And especially on not a Legion book, because that's a lot of our shared love and how we connected was Legion of Superheroes. And I'm always here for more Legion of Superheroes conversation. But it's nice to know that you contain multitudes.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, Superman is kind of a gateway to pretty much everything in DC. Superman is another love of mine as well, especially with all the new stuff going on with this book, and you have the new My Adventures with Superman cartoon out there. That's awesome. So yeah, I'm here for it all.
Yeah, it's a good time to be a Superman fan.
Absolutely.
You're eating finally.
I know, right?
Finally.
Like the last season of Superman and Lois is coming out right about now. Mm-hmm. And that, I have mixed feelings about it ending because I have actually really enjoyed that show. We haven't talked about it as much as we initially hoped. We talked about it a bunch when it first came out and then haven't had a chance to really do like season recaps, which we wished that we had, but it was always just like timing ended up being weird. And all of a sudden it was like, oh, that was the new season's already out now. But yeah, we're eating as Superman fans. But one area that we're eating and it's real good, or at least it's been real good recently, and I would say just generally is that classic pairing of Superman with Batman. Like that is so important to the history of Superman. Like I was saying before, there's such a foundation of like these rich like what if stories or just like team up stories between the two and Robin, really making up this triumvirate. That were, tons of stories from the 50s, 60s, 70s, like, and continuing to do like many more like wonderful runs with that same title. At some point we're going to have to talk about the 90s World's Finest maxi series, like the 12 issues that like takes place like each year with them jumping forward in stories as like their first encounter into their modern friendship. But the recent book with Mark Waid and Dan Mora, man, that's a really good book.
It was good.
It's amazing. Yeah, it's probably, in my opinion, I think it's probably the best thing that DC has been publishing over the last 2 years.
I mean, kind of, yeah. Like, I am a noted Mark Waid stan, and
me too.
So I don't think it's a surprise. And then Dan Mora just is a great artist and has really blown up. So coming from Power Rangers, or at least like that's where he like first crossed my radar, which is also just a fun bit. But like he's just like one of those artists like that just like really stands out, like a Chris Sprouse, for example. We were talking off mic about Legion stuff before this, and like that's the kind of artist where it's just like, yeah, no, everything he draws just like looks pretty good. Like,
yep.
Especially with like this like classic style. So like this is set in an unspecified past where things are just a little bit more Silver Agey. Like when we finally see the Titans, it's like the 60s version of the Titans. It's not even like the 80s new Teen Titans, which would have been sort of like the low hanging fruit there.
Yet it still has a kind of a more modern spin to everything.
Yeah. Right? It feels updated, but classic. It, a very timeless kind of approach to to these characters.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I'm sure we'll get into this, but I mean, specifically, I think what jumps out at me when I look at this whole book, right, is kind of Robin, right, how he's drawn and depicted.
Robin in this book is probably my favorite part, frankly.
Yeah.
Because I like everything else that's going on in this book, but you know what? This book made me remember how much I like Dick Grayson as Robin.
Yes.
Because like Dick Grayson is one of the few characters who's managed to like get a new identity and like really like own it. Like he's Nightwing now, like, and he's Nightwing in most media that he appears in now, which is, a real testament to the character's transition. Like not a lot of characters can take up a new identity like that and own it that much. But here, like we're getting that like fully with, or rather like here we're reminded like how great the Dick Grayson Robin was, I think everyone has like an opinion on their favorite Robin, but I think it's hard to deny that like Dick Grayson being the original had an essential flavor that made the dynamic with Batman, but especially the dynamic with Batman and Superman, so wonderful. Mm-hmm. And Mark Waid writes the shit out of this character.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it's you have this view of him where it's kind of the greatest hits of Robin kind of distilled into this one character. He's he has all the abilities, right, and the fighting capabilities, but he also has the wit and the one-liners and the comebacks and and just a lot of really good moments that just make you feel good, right, and make you laugh and make you realize this is why I like comic books, right?
Yeah, and the introduction of the awkward tension with Supergirl, which is so fucking beautiful. Like it's two characters who you always figure like, they probably should have been like better friends than they were in the comics. And I was like, oh, here's why, because it's like they're incredibly uncomfortable with each other.
Yeah. And I can't remember. It's definitely down the line. I can't remember when in the future of the series they actually get into what happened, but which is an awesome read.
Yeah, it's a fantastic single issue that is just the worst date two superheroes can have. Yeah, it's like they do wonderful stuff there, and Kara is great as well as a character. Like once she like is like looped into this, because it starts with the foundation of Superman, Batman, and Robin, but they quickly bring in other team members, and it's not like, well, we have to go do this alone because we're the dynamic. Like it's fully inviting the 60s Doom Patrol.
Yeah.
and Supergirl and like this whole dynamic here. It's wonderful. So it
looks so good too. All this art style, it's so good.
Yeah, the art's so good. It like we're just getting wonderfully classic renditions of these characters. Like we get the blue and gray Batman, which I always love.
Yep.
Like yeah.
And then one of the things that jumped out at me too, the bat emblem for the quote unquote modern story parts of this is it's almost like very specifically designed to be that late 80s early 90s Michael Keaton Batman era logo, right, with kind of that scalloped wing underneath of the bat symbol, right, and it's it's just perfectly drawn, and and so it really kind of helps, like you were saying earlier, Casey, it really kind of helps cement the time frame of kind of when these things are happening, but not being too specific about it. And just there's a lot of visual shorthand here that really helps move the book along without being bogged down in too much exposition, I think.
Yeah. Now, on that note, we should probably talk about how they open this story, considering that it's not exactly out of continuity, but it's out of it's a flashback to a slightly earlier time. It could fit in whatever canon you sort of choose to accept for these characters.
Yeah.
So the threat of this arc is entirely invented, I think. I wouldn't put it past Mark Waid to actually have this be like a deep cut DC reference, but like I think it's entirely invented for this arc.
Well, I did a little bit of poking around on that because I was curious about this exact thing as well. So the Devil Nezha was actually, from what I understand, introduced in the Monkey Prince.
Oh, was he?
Really?
Yeah. So if you look around on that, that's kind of where the character was kind of built from the DC Universe point of view, anyway.
Okay, that's wild because I read that book, but at the same time, like it was just like, ooh, here's the next supernatural thing, and then whoosh, like out of my head, next supernatural thing, whoosh, out of my head.
Right. I mean, I think it was just I think that was a very quick intro in that book, and I think this Mark just like appropriated it to use for his purpose.
That makes sense. Mark Waid does love incredibly deep cut continuity, and so I'm sorry for just immediately putting my foot in my mouth, because like I just assumed that the story, because it does feel like such a bottle episode or bottle plot, I should say, that it could just be like completely in a vacuum. Actually, that makes me think of, there was this one time back when Kurt Busiek was doing Untold Tales of Spider-Man, where the annual for that, and then I think the annual for the Avengers, or it was some Untold Tales was like when Spider-Man was a boy kind of stories. And then he was like doing some modern book for Marvel. He did simultaneously in the same month, like the first appearance of this villain back in like the retro times, and then on modern time as he gets out of jail for the first time after his first like appearance. As a fun way of playing with time. So considering like when Monkey Prince was coming out in relation to this, like those are like pretty overlapping in terms of like publication.
Yeah, I think it was in the like very early issue. It's been forever, so I didn't actually go back and read it. I want to do that actually just because of time, you know.
Yeah.
But what I'm not sure about, this is kind of one of the reasons I want to go back and read this, is that the character is loosely based on some Chinese mythology. That, you know, and so and in kind of the exposition background issue that goes into this, where, you know, Supergirl and Robin basically go back in time and kind of meet the people that entombed him originally. They kind of tell the story, and the story actually I think it's Doom Patrol that actually tells the legend of the character, but it tracks pretty closely with the actual mythological character that's out there, who's kind of a almost like a Thor type, or not a Thor, a Loki type of character. In Chinese mythology,
right?
So
but
kind of
that
neat,
then also had like a Super Sentai team that he went to battle,
which was awesome. I love that. Actually. That was really cool.
That I adored that feature so much. I guess what I was just trying to get at is that this is a bottle story. Like this can completely exist in a vacuum from any continuity that you care about, or any canon that you care about. Like it's a story that happens, and it's like could just be a one-off. The fact that the character may have appeared previously, but like in terms of the timeline at a later point, and is open to you all, like, and I don't think this really affects that. So I think it's really effective in terms of introducing, like, okay, we've got a basic threat that is going to pop up. It's an adventure for these characters, and it's kind of a one and done, and it doesn't screw up anything when everything is over. The only thing that like you could argue could screw up anything in terms of like the structure of this with like your canon for DC is the fact that Supergirl can casually fly through time.
Yeah. I noted that as well. That was a little bit okay. Sure,
I'm like totally fine with it from a Silver Age standpoint, and I'm like, oh, I guess we now exist in a world where like Silver Age is the deal.
She's like, hold on, we're going in.
I love that moment. I am always here for that. Like this is like a Suprema or like an Alan Moore Supreme kind of like casual approach to those levels of superpowers, and I find that really fun. It's a really interesting way to take the characters, as opposed to just the like, oh my god, I can't believe I can do this thing where I break through time. It's just like, no, we're like we're going. I know all the tricks for like following people through time. I'm like, and I loved it because it was just like like they're arguing, and it's just like, and then it's just like, hold on, we're about to break through the time barrier.
Exactly. I was a little bit surprised though that, you know, they didn't, you know, talking Silver Age, even, you know, in the 90s when they would do this, they'd have that kind of that rainbow motif.
Yeah.
You know, and they didn't, there was more of like this purple haze, which was fine. You know, it was good visual effect, but I was kind of looking for they're going through time. I was hoping to see like, you know, some of those rainbow swirls or whatever.
Yeah. With the years flying by or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I think this book is trying to be visually updated takes on like a very Silver Age like point.
Absolutely.
With Mark Waid's like sensibilities as a writer and as a, you know, like as a dialogue writer specifically.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And then with Dan Mora's amazing fucking art, like just great stuff here.
I mean, you know, Mark Waid is extremely, you know, he knows comics like nobody's business, and you know, to be able to he was, you know, talk about bring up the Legion again, right? He was heavily involved in their post 0 Hour reboot because he knew so much about them.
Yeah.
right? I mean, he did some writing and then he kind of jumped off and let the others handle it. But he knows these guys inside and out. And so, when you talk about having these updated Silver Age type stories, he's like one of the best people ever to be able to do that.
Yeah, like it's almost quaint for us to like try to have like a real conversation about this book that isn't just like Mark Waid's like doing a really good job here, doing exactly what Mark Waid does, and Dan Mora doing a really good job doing exactly what Dan Mora does.
Mark Waid's just going to Mark Waid.
Yeah,
that's how it is.
So why don't we hop over to the backup story? Because like the villain Nezha, like it's cool they bring in the Doom Patrol. I love that they have like the face off between the smartest guy in the room, between Batman and Niles Calder. Like that that's great. I love the dynamics of how the Doom Patrol function. But like ultimately it's like, okay, a great villain is arising. After 10,000 years I'm free. It's time to conquer Earth. Shows up and then they put them back in the dumpster. After with some time travel shenanigans and so forth, but like they win is the thing. It's a very concise like villain shows up. We spend 2 issues like he's able to possess people and do stuff, but like we beat the villain. Then Robin, in the midst of this all, gets lost in a time storm, and then they have to go find him, which I really appreciate this issue for a bunch of reasons. One, it allows us to do the thing that's always great, which is the like crime scene of a character who is lost in time situation, because he's like, all right, well, how do I like get a message to them at this exact moment? So it's like, like the Doc Brown, like having the post office, like take the letter at the end of Back to the Future Part 2, like that kind of a scene happens here. And that's great. And then Robin is back in the 19th century as a circus performer solving in a detective story. And I like, this is why I like really like hit, like all of a sudden latched onto the whole Robin being so strong in this book, because like he's great, but like you don't notice him necessarily more so than Supergirl or any other major character in the first 5 issues. But issue 6 all of a sudden being a Robin story, I'm like, oh right, I remember reading Robin backup stories and like Robin centric stories for Dick Grayson specifically, but he never had like his own book the way that like Tim Drake did.
Right, and that was Robin. Yeah, exactly.
Right. So like we never got to see a detective story with Robin, Dick Grayson the same way, like, or we got them, but they were backup stories, like I said, or they were solo outings in Teen Titans, or things like that, or it was a Batman story that happened to be a Robin centric one, but we didn't get like that Dick Grayson book. And here was an issue that was a Dick Grayson issue of him just being Robin, being an amazing detective, and also being really in on like circus folk and like talking about like, with his reverence for like this like performer's lifestyle, which I think is really cool. And it's also a thing that like is, a dying art in America, probably the world, but like definitely in America.
Yeah, for sure.
And so like it's interesting to have this like reverence for it and like this real appreciation for like the people who put so much work into this type of performance. And like I said, it's just a thing from a bygone age that like we're nostalgic for, and is so core to Robin's identity that it's nice to like really let him like live in that space again. Mm-hmm. Like there's an episode of Young Justice, the cartoon show, that has like a very Robin centric episode, like where he's like dealing with like a circus thing, and it's like the same basic setup, but like it's a great setup. I'm so happy to like have that there. And then to have Batman join him as like his like trapeze partner is so cool. And Superman as a strongman, which, like the whole Superman being inspired by strongmen, like things, wonderful stuff. Like, and the fact that Robin it's not that Batman shows up and all of a sudden is able to solve the mystery. Like it's Robin's mystery the whole time, and his buddies Batman and Superman. And
right. Yeah, he has some backup with them helping him out. Like, Superman sees the cash under the floor or whatever it was, that just, they just gave him kind of the boost to get the bad guy in the end, so it was
always good.
Like you said, it was Robin's deal.
Yeah. So yeah, just a wonderful issue. And, like the kind of thing where it showed the range that this book was going to have, because like doing like a solid standalone arc of Superman and Batman, fighting a demon that's escaping from
years.
Exactly. Like that kind of thing is child's play for Mark Waid. Like he's the master at doing those kind of stories. And then to remind us like, oh, we're going to get like solo stories, and we're going to get, like it just gives you this like hope for like what the series would eventually become. And lived up to that hope. I think that, Jim, you said this is one of the best books that like DC's putting out in the last 3 years. Yeah, I'm right there with you.
Yeah, I mean, think about like all the you mentioned the guest characters that pop in. Your Doom Patrol, obviously. You get the Justice League members here and there. This big face off with the possessed Hal Jordan, right, as part of this. But what really kind of blows me away about this is that of course Mark nails the characterizations, but he's able to find these really inventive ways to use these powers. Right, where they're sitting there fighting against Green Lantern, and the Superman and Batman merge together.
Oh my God! I can't believe I didn't bring that up yet. Oh my God,
that was so wild. I thought that was the coolest thing.
Talk about some anime bullshit right there. But like, I can't believe I wasn't even thinking about that just until you mentioned it. I was like, oh my God, that was like such a showstopper. Like Twitter would not shut up about that thing when it happened.
Yep. And then, so you have things like that are just kind of just these awesome brainstorms. But then you have these weird technology and character moments like Negative Man, right?
Yeah.
There's that one moment of Negative Man where he absorbs all the red kryptonite energy, or it turns into a red sun so that they can work on. I mean, just these, you think back at those moments, and you're like, yeah, that's an obvious choice to make. But I would never thought of something like that if I were writing this, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Mark has this ability to have these wild ideas that completely make sense in the context of the story.
Yeah, spot on. That's exactly like 100%. Like that's always been a thing I've loved about Mark Waid. Side note, Mark Waid is probably my favorite writer to ever write Hal Jordan. He's just always like got the exact vibe right for this like cocky son of a bitch who you can't help but kind of love, in a way that like I don't think I've really liked as many people's takes on Hal Jordan. It usually bugs me a little bit.
Yeah, especially what's his face from Deadpool. His take on Hal Jordan was not that great.
Well, I mean, like I would point anyone if you're like curious of like why I'm making this statement when we only see him for like 2 panels here. It's that.
It's important 2 panels. Okay?
It's important. But look at JLA Year One and look at The Brave and the Bold, Flash, and Green Lantern. Those 2 books by Mark Waid, and I think Barry Kitson's the artist on both. They are very heavily centric on. Well, they're both heavily focused on the relationship of Hal Jordan and Barry Allen, and it's just fantastic stuff with those 2 characters. And like,
was that like around 2005, 2006? That area is that
a little earlier because it was like my high school era, so it was like 2000 ish, maybe 99, somewhere in that ballpark.
Something else to add to the list. I got to read now.
Yeah, no, Mark Waid that's the other thing. He did JLA Year One, like, which was an amazing series about like the first year of the Justice League, right after their like meeting initially, like defeating a bunch of aliens trying to take over the world. Because again, Mark Waid is really good at this stuff, but it's also just old hat for DC Comics as a whole. So like he's really good at doing these sort of like flashback, but still feeling current and feeling, like the characters are updated takes on the Silver Age molds for these characters. He's just really good at doing those. And this book is that. And it continues being great. Like we're only talking about the first 6 issues today, but like the series continues to be really solid.
So here's something else I wanted to point out here too. And this kind of talking about, revisiting old themes and stuff like that. I think in a weird way, I kind of think Waid was kind of revisit his own stuff and do it a little bit better here. So in this particular arc, right, the Devil Nezha is kind of taking one of the aspects of it. They're taking kind of these B tier villains and they're getting amped up. Right, as part of this trap to for his world domination thing. When I was reading this time,
were you thinking of Underworld Unleashed?
Yeah, which is also a Mark Waid thing.
I thought about that too, actually, when I was reading it, and I'm glad you mentioned it because I wasn't thinking about that now. No, that makes a lot of sense, especially considering that the next arc of this book is then like him looking at his Kingdom Come era.
Yeah, exactly. Right,
but very subtly, which I think a lot. I mean, at least it opens very subtly. It does not end very subtly.
Not at all. Not at all. but that popped in. This did not occur to me the first time I read these stories. But when I was rereading this last week to prep here, I'm like, this is just like what Underworld Unleashed was doing, but it's doing it way better. Because I don't think highly of that particular crossover event, because that's when, you know, in the 90s when there was always some kind of weird summer crossover event, and this one I wasn't a big fan of that one.
I had warm feelings about that one, mostly because like the ultimate hero of it was Captain Marvel, and like that's always going to be like a soft spot for me. It heavily centered. It heavily centered on Alan Scott and Captain Marvel as like protagonists of the series, and like that's always going to be like my like, oh yeah, fuck yeah, I'm here for it.
Yeah.
But I hear what you're saying, because like the redesigns for a lot of those characters were like kind of hard to swallow. Some were fine, some were actually pretty good, but like it was a lot to like throw at the DC universe.
Yeah, and you know, and these are B or C tier villains for a reason, right?
Masters, so, is he a B tier? I don't know if he's a B tier. He might be a D tier.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, exactly. You're like, I don't care that this guy has superpower or even more superpowers now. You know, I'm like, okay, whatever. But it was what it was. It led to some interesting things here and there across the DCU at the time. But
also, did they get the Flash out of the mirror dimension? Because they kind of glossed over that.
Yeah, that's a good. You know what? They kind of did just kind of gloss over it.
I mean, they must have, but
no, because they never. He was like, "Oh no, Flash, stop!" And then he gets trapped in the dimension, and then Mirror Master chases Clark around with mirrors, and then that's it. Like you never see the Flash again. And I was like, "Wait."
Yeah, right. That's a really good point, Jay Mike. And another one too that was a lot that similar to that was in the first book, the first issue, when it's Metallo and Poison Ivy are kind of the two rabble rousers of the main part of the story. You know, at the end, they get to this point where like, oh, just let the cops handle these guys. Meanwhile, you know, like, you're just gonna let the cops handle Poison Ivy? I mean, come on. You know, it's not gonna work out well.
Yeah, they're good.
But you got to move on the plot, so I get
right. Yeah. I mean, like the argument was that there were big. I guess with Poison Ivy, it's just I don't know.
Well, I mean, by that point, I think Batman had poisoned her, or like he'd used the weed be gone on her, so she was kind of neutralized.
Yeah, I guess so. But it's like, you never know when she's gonna wake up and all that stuff.
Yeah.
It was just kind of a little. Okay, let's move on real quick. Let's go.
Yeah. Also, did they get Wonder Woman back to normal? Because she was clay.
Oh, I'm sure, you know, pay no attention to the memes bars. You know, so
yeah, like clearly they like fixed the things after it. I mean, like maybe you could argue that once the Devil Nezha is like imprisoned again, all the machinations he did like was reverted or something.
Yeah.
I mean,
we hope.
Clearly we know she got better.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean,
we just don't know the details of how.
Yeah.
But I feel like once you just defeat like and also the power that was in Felix Faust was because of the Devil Nezha. So like, yeah, like once he's imprisoned, it probably did negate those powers that was doing the things.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think so too.
Yeah.
That's just how, I guess that's what the reader is supposed to assume.
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, because clearly also then Billy Batson like has a mouth again.
Yeah, exactly. As soon as they kind of knock out, he's back to normal.
Yeah.
Mind manipulation.
It's concentration mechanics from D&D.
Right.
Yeah. So like that's the thing though. I find myself just like wanting to just be like, man, this book's so good.
I know.
I don't have like other great notes to like discuss about it. It's just like, oh yeah, no, this was really good.
Okay. So I had questions. First one was like in the beginning of the book, Lois comes, she mentions Clark at like the first page, and then she comes out on the rooftop and she's like going over all the stuff about Superman. But is it at a point where she doesn't know Clark is Superman?
That is my understanding.
But yeah, my understanding based on the time when this occurs.
Yeah.
So it's like she's doing all this stuff like she just knows about Superman and not Clark.
Yeah, I think the way that I kind of, and this is more just because of what I know from DC history, the Superman reveal where, you know, he basically tells Lois that, you know, who he is. That does not happen until Robin is on his own in his Nightwing. At least in the past of the DC universe, right?
Mm-hmm.
So my shorthand is, okay, this is Dick Grayson Robin. You know, he's not the brand new recruit partner, but so he's somewhere in his mid-teens, probably 16 years old, probably. So this is well before, you know, Jason Todd and Tim Drake and all that kind of stuff when they did all that stuff. So that was just my internal shorthand for that.
Yeah, I mean, this is clearly supposed to be a Silver Age time period, so you figure that the relationships are kind of like set at that point.
Yeah.
So I did want to, we talked about the Negative Man changing his energy field to be red solar energy to weaken Superman. We actually didn't talk about why. And I do think that it was a really creative attack on him, having like the injection of red kryptonite molecules. I thought that was a very fun way of introducing this idea that he's like rapidly changing and like hallucinating, and just like all these things are happening to him simultaneously, and they're all bad.
Yeah. And, when I was reading this too, I was thinking about, like, off before we started talking, we were talking a little bit about my adventures with Superman, right? Those similar things like that are touched on in the cartoon, right?
Yeah.
Where you have, and it's usually, it's not so much, in the reality, right? But the whole concept of what Amanda Waller is doing, right? And the Brainiac role in that story, kind of say, hey, you're a menace to the world, right? That I was very much, and this is obviously just because I've just recently watched the show. It really reminded me of that particular moment.
Mm-hmm.
So good. It's so good.
I know.
Yeah, I'm just like scrolling through now, looking for like other things that are like, oh, this was also really dope.
Yeah, well, because we talked about kind of the shorthand that Waid and Mora both use as part of this, right? This was another thing that I really liked about the book, was that they didn't waste too much time with Superman and Batman in dialogue saying, hey, you're my best friend now, right? That kind of thing. It was just very quick flashbacks or just dialogue moments that really illustrated the relationship that Superman and Batman have.
Yeah,
right?
like when Superman is down because of the injection of the red kryptonite, and like there's a shot of Batman just like it cuts to a fight with Mongol, and it's just like, like they've been through thick and thin together.
Exactly. But it's like we don't even beat over the head with it, which is great. I mean, it keeps the story snappy. You get some really cool visuals as part of it, right? Mm-hmm. It's A grade comic book writer.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Speaking of great comic book writer, one thing that I want to bring up that I thought was like really nice, just as a quick moment, and by nice I mean fucking sad, was General Immortus.
Yeah,
like being this immortal with Alzheimer's.
Oh yeah.
And
yeah,
like, man, that gave me the feels right there very quickly. It's wonderful, again, wonderful shorthand to get you to feel a lot of things throughout this whole thing. And then it cuts to they're like kung fu Sentai team fight. Like this book again contains multitudes.
Yes, yeah. And then the other thing I want to make sure that I mentioned, because I made this is one of the biggest bullets on my notes here, is just to talk about just Dan Mora's art, because it's super effective. It's just it's great visual storytelling, very dynamic.
Yeah.
And it's easy to figure out what the hell's going on. It's just super well done. But and this is another thing that popped into my head reading this time versus just reading the series over the last few years, is that I got big time Norm Breyfogle vibes from his style, just from the way it's angular yet fluid, if that makes any sense. That's because I came to Superman through Batman, basically, because I started reading comics seriously after the Keaton Batman movie. And then at that point in time, right, Batman Detective Comics, Breyfogle was the primary artist on Detective. And he has a very distinct style with his drawing of Batman, and that the very these swooping almost borderline nightmarish visions of Batman with these swooping pointed capes and cowls and everything. And this Mora's art style here really reminded me of that while I was kind of going through here.
Yeah, I was like trying to like picture it, and so I've like looked up a bunch of stuff, and like I definitely see what you're talking about here.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. You can definitely see some like influences there.
Yeah, no, for sure.
It's fucking beautiful, though. I think that his art style is amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, before I forget, I was laughing because I read it twice to make sure I read it correctly. the Batman Superman fusion thing. And I was like, this is totally a DBZ callback because they're doing it without the fusion dance, but they're using the Patara ring by way of the Green Lantern ring.
The Green Lantern ring, yeah.
And I was like, wait a second. And I read about here and I was like, oh, you cheeky bastards. I see what you did here.
Yeah. No, it's certainly a Patara ring or earring kind of version of it because we get the costumes being fused together.
Yeah. And they even have like the countdown for how much longer they have.
Right.
And I was like, I hate you guys so much, but this is beautiful.
Yeah. The fusion of Superman, Batman, and Green Lantern's powers. You got to like keep that one in there.
Because like certain when he's using the power, when they're using the powers, like some of the accents in the suit turn green too. Like his hands are green at certain points. And I was like, oh, this is awesome.
Yeah.
It's also funny they just willed the ring off of Hal, which I didn't know was
well, that's
possible.
actually happened. Yeah. That has usually happened in reverse where Hal has used his willpower to override someone else who's taken the ring. But it has occurred where there's been like will offs with rings like that. And that's the whole reason why it's like the sternest willpower people are the ones with the rings, because then you can't do it to them.
I never have one. I never get one.
No. It's like, what are your thoughts about late night snacks?
Exactly.
Oh,
I love them. You can't use a ring.
oh no. My one weakness.
Yes.
Yeah.
Your lack of willpower in general. Yeah, man. It is wild though that now that we're like getting into this whole conversation, and like I didn't like normally I don't need to like really prepare a lot of notes for the conversations just because like I usually have like big bullet points I want to like bring up, and like it's usually a fun conversation. This one is so much the sum of its parts are so strong. And maybe it might almost be the parts are stronger than the summation, because the summation I'm just like, man, this is a great book with like a cool bottle episode story and then like some time travel shenanigans. Yeah, man.
Yeah.
But it is fascinating to look at how like every page has like something that's really good going on for it. And it almost becomes like a noise of like all this good. And it really benefits to like slow down and actually like stop and observe like page by page and not look at it in like the broad context.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I mean, I on this reread, I was kind of struck how I guess the first couple issues are good. Yeah, they're good establishment. Okay, they're kind of setting the tone of what they're of the stories, right? Of how they're going to be doing this. But I was like, okay, this is kind of cool. Kind of like what you're saying. But about somewhere it was probably issue 4. It was sometime probably around when they had the fusion, and then on from there. I was like, I need to find out what happens next, right? And then, of course, because they started ending the issues with these really great cliffhangers. Mm-hmm. And then I was like, I got to get to the next book, and then, the end of the main story with Robin still being missing. You're like, okay, I got to find out what happens to Robin now, right? So, and then, of course, and then, the series builds off of that because, like we kind of mentioned before, we go into that Kingdom Come kind of story, right? And then from there, it just keeps on building onto itself. To be the point where I really got addicted to the story. This is why I think it's the best book in DC's catalog right now. Just because I need to find out what happens next. That's the best mark of a storyteller right there.
Yeah, like there is a nice like breath that you can take at the end of issue 6. So it's not true like serial storytelling where there's like the end of the one arc has like the teaser for the next arc. It's not always like that, but at least mid arc you're just like, oh yeah, there's a cliffhanger for that. There's a cliffhanger for that. Another classic Mark Waid thing. I mean, if anyone ever read his Impulse run knows that like, man, he loves like fun cliffhangers.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Sometimes literally. Sometimes in a Corvette going over the cliff.
Yeah, I mean, issue 6 does really resolve the first arc completely, right? Because but I think there is a teaser at the end of it about the next issue, right? And there's kind of that hint that it's something to do with from a Kingdom Come standpoint. I think
was it so much a teaser or just that the hang on. Because issue 5 has the Lazarus world or whatever.
Yeah.
It was the story that would go into Batman versus Robin, which actually was a pretty good book. I really actually enjoyed that.
I think it might have just been the next issue thing, but either way, this is just a very solid book, and it's one that I think that people should check out in general. It continues to be great. Continued as far as I've read up to, but apparently is continuing with this team. So continues to be great. I feel confident in saying that. I should note that I've read probably the next 10 issues after this, and that somewhere in there is where I've it's getting hazy, but I read all through the next major arc and love it. And it's a really fun book, and I think people should check it out. And if you're worried about digging into an ongoing series, the first six issues, like we said, have a really good pause point after you're done there, and you can just be cool, this was fine, or this was great, or this wasn't. If you don't want to continue, don't worry about it. But I would say check out the first six issues. It runs through very nicely. It keeps you moving. Like I said, each page has a lot going for it. There's really fun concepts and ideas going on all over the place with gorgeous art, and one that I think really appreciates that deeper read, but if you just want to read through it quickly, it's very breezy at the same time. So I would highly recommend it. I don't know, Jim, do you have anything else you want to say about the book?
Oh, geez, that I haven't already. I mean, again, I feel like I've been doing nothing but gush on this title for the entire conversation here, because it's really is that great. I mean, anything that we come up with that we're kind of maybe nitpicking are literally just picking nits, right? There is very little that is bad about these titles, but it's really good. It really delves into a lot of the kind of the really neat little nuggets of the DC universe, a further arc that goes after the Kingdom Come one is all about Simon Stagg and Morpho and all that kind of stuff. And we even get kind of a true visit to the Kingdom Come universe in another issue, and you kind of understand how he's playing from a multiverse perspective with all of this. And so it's all really great. I mean, I can't say enough about this. That's great.
Yeah. Jmike, how about you? Anything that we missed?
No, I'm just kind of like you said earlier, the sign of a good book is you wanting to read more. And now I'm like, this is freaking awesome. I want to keep reading. It's just really good to see. You never really get a chance to see Batman and Superman working together as good friends, because everyone's oh, who would win, Batman or Superman? It's obviously Superman, but that's beside the point. Anyway, it's good to see them. Martha. It's always good to see them on as being the best friends they always are. And it's always during this particular run, Batman is the one who is always he's the more emotional one here. And something goes wrong and he's oh, you gotta save him. He's going through a rough time, blah, blah. He's he's being very emotional. You never get a chance to see Batman do that. When he gets stabbed with the kryptonite, Batman's freaking out. When Superman gets locked behind the door, Batman's the one freaking out, oh, he can't be gone. I gotta figure out a way to save him. But he's also the one that figures out that there's a hole to the Phantom Zone. Right. It's closing. And he's the only one who notices that. And Superman's took you long enough. Oh God. It was that dynamic is always really good to see between these two. And it's always a fun ride when it's done correctly. And this time it's done freaking awesome.
This is fair. We actually haven't gushed that much about the specific takes on Superman or Batman in this. And I think that you bring up a great point that Batman has what our friend June has described as weird poet energy in this, where it's oh yeah, it's the Grant Morrison using being Batman as therapy kind of take. Right. And I think that they do a really good job of having this be a Batman who is much better balanced than a lot of times, and part of that is because of the healthy relationships he has with Robin and with Superman. So this is a good Batman. This is a Batman who is in a good place. He is channeling his past traumas in a positive way, it feels like here, as opposed to a destructive way, which is sometimes how Batman is depicted.
Why did you say that name?
Well, when it's that level of a crusade that is just
because when they get trapped in hell, quote unquote, Batman's freaking out. Clark is the calm mind person.
Yeah, absolutely.
Batman is completely off his rocker, and he's oh God, my parents. And like Faust is playing with his mind and everything, and Superman is like quiet and calm and collected, and he figures out it's an illusion, which is something that you'd never think Clark would be doing. You figured it'd be reversed.
Yeah, but I mean, it's good to have both of them be smart, but in different ways. In this.
Yeah,
and to have different assets there, and that was really good. And like the Superman is also a really good take. You know, it is a Silver Age style Superman who is competent and capable, but also compassionate and kind. And I'm running out of CK sounds to say there.
No, those are just great points though, and Jmike, you like that was just a perfect summary about. I think one of the other reasons that I like this so much because. I'm on record about saying that comics and comic book movies, especially over the last 20 and probably even more years, they're just way too dark. You know what I mean? It's like, I guess there's a time and a place for that kind of stuff, right? But, I kind of think that we've gone, in the last 20 years, especially, with the Snyderverse, it's this really dark and kind of downer world, especially vis-a-vis Superman, right? Yeah. And these stories, especially where we are kind of now generally, like My Adventure with Superman, you got this, you have the Lois and Lois and Superman that are very, they have their drama in the story, but Superman as a character, as a person, is upbeat, positive, competent, and the story itself is. I don't feel like I'm in a depression after I finish reading the story, right? So I really appreciate that because that's why I read comic books to begin with, right? Because I want to be told a great story where they have good guys and bad guys, and the good guys kick the bad guys' ass after some some drama and some story, and this really encapsulates all of that.
Mm-hmm. For real. Well, I think that we've covered a lot of what we want to say. I realize this is what I have said this now multiple times or like, man, what else is there to say? And then it's like, oh, there's actually way more. And but I feel like we're at a good place. We've talked about our leads. We've talked about most of the beats of all the different stories at different points. We've talked about the things that we really like that are outside of that and the moments that really affected us. So I feel like we've come through the entire book pretty effectively right now.
Because it's a great book.
Yeah, it's a great book. Really like that's the thing I'm going to keep on coming back to. It's like it's just really well written. It's beautiful art, and the dialogue is crisp, and the story moves, but at the same time has like some really like nice things in there for people who really dig like DC continuity or DC lore. So yeah, it's a really solid book that you should all check out if you haven't already. And if you haven't and listened to this whole episode, cool. I'm really glad that we actually have people like you who are willing to like listen to us like talk for an hour about a comic you haven't actually read, when we have most of the time are just being like, yeah, it's really good. Yeah, it's really good. Yeah, it's really good. So Jim, thank you for coming on. Thank you for suggesting this book actually.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we were kind of brainstorming and I'm like, what's really good? And this popped into my head. I'm like, we got to talk about this. It's such a good book.
Yeah. And it's wild that we hadn't really like looked at it on this show. So like, like I said, we're probably not going to be able to like cover like, unless there's like another major arc that we feel like is like really important for us to talk about, just because there's so much Superman media for us to talk about. Again, we're eating, but like for those of us who have to like describe the meal, it's a lot. But so Jim, thank you again for coming back on. Where can people find you, follow you? What have you got going on?
For sure. So people can find me. I'm on Twitter. I refuse to call it X. And Blue Sky, I'm at Jimbo Fett 87, FETT 87. And I also have a blog where right now I'm going through the Legion of Superheroes version 5, the 3-boot continuity. And that's jimboslegion.blogspot.com. I just released my review on issue 29, which is right before Mark Waid jumps off of this title because of DC editorial shenanigans, but that's a whole other story.
Yeah, you have done wonderful write-ups on these issues. It's really fun seeing your insight on the various stories, even when we don't always necessarily agree, since I'm an apologist for the DNA run, which I know that you've been a little bit harsher on.
Well, that's why, this is comic books. It's fun to talk about all this stuff,
And it's nice that we can have different opinions and still have like a really good time just gushing about a book sometimes.
Yeah.
No, people should check out your write-ups. Like you have wonderful insight. Like I said, even if I don't agree, I do appreciate the thought that you put into each issue that you're looking at.
I do try to be fair about, what I'm looking at.
Yeah.
And so, and if, and at the end of the day, even the DNA stuff, right? I mean, I actually do give it a pretty fair shake. So, and it ends up coming out not too bad. So,
yeah, no, and I'm not trying to paint you as a hater. It's just, I just you have more critiques than my rosy view of it all. Now, Jmike, where can people find you and follow you?
Oh God, you can find me on Twitter at Jmike101. I occasionally say things. I respond to things sometimes. But hit me up. I'll be glad to send you a meme.
Well, your meme game is always on point, my friend.
I try.
As for me, you can find me on most of the platforms at Case Aiken, except for Instagram, where I am Quetzalcoatl5, because I am a Legion of Superheroes fan, and that's where we get the 5. And I was also a pretentious mythology nerd in high school, and that's where we get the Quetzalcoatl. So you can find me on Instagram at Quetzalcoatl5. You can find the show on Twitter at Men of Steel Pod. You can find the episodes that we put out anywhere where you get podcasts, or on our YouTube channel, where we have a bunch of other content up there, including my Superman analog videos. Check those out if you haven't checked them already. They're fun, quick descriptions of Superman type characters, roughly 5-ish minutes long each. So they're pretty quick and they're fun. And yeah, that I think covers all the things. Thank you for listening, everyone. Our Discord. Find our Discord server. Man, I am just like on this like slow game today. I'm like, yeah, check out our Discord. We're gonna have fun conversations about the episodes or like various topics. There's been lively conversations going on because it's SDCC when we're recording this, and so the comic book chat is going nuts right now. So check that all out. It's wonderful discourse, and we'd love to have you there. And otherwise, until next time, stay super, man.
Men of Steel is a certain POV production. Our hosts are Jmike Folson and Case Aiken. The show is edited by Sophia Ricciardi. Our logo is by Chris Batista, and episode art is by Case Aiken. Our theme is by Geoff Moonen.
Are you tired of watching your beloved characters being tortured by careless authors?
Are you sick of feeling like they could have swapped out all of the painful action and the plot would remain untouched? Subscribe to Books That Burn, the fortnightly book review podcast focusing on fictional depictions of trauma.
We assume that the characters' reactions are reasonable and focus on how badly or well they were served by their authors.
Join us for our minor character spotlights, main character discussions, and favorite non-traumatic things in the dark books we love.
Find us on Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, or wherever you get your podcasts.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.